G'day, I'm Anthony Ogilve, the Environmental Sustainability Lead for CSC Australia. Today I want to run through our program, the lessons that we've learnt and some of the issues that we've encountered. And I hope that by doing that you'll gain something of interest and something that you can use in your own organisation to help you embed your sustainability programs and get them into business as usual. Probably the first lesson I'd like to try and get across is that it's a sustainability program. So we don't just get focused on energy reduction. For us, it's really important that we move beyond just a CO2 focus or a green focus. I'm not a huge fan of the word green. I tend to find that for most people it brings a conversation that very much focuses on just the environment and just conservation. So for us, we wanted to make sure that to maximise the benefit we were going to get out of our program, that we started thinking of it as sustainability to capture the bigger picture. In Australia, between September and October 2006, the environmental movement of climate change and sustainability moved from a relatively fringe issue to mainstream front and centre policies. And that was because the Stern report came out, the IPCC report came out, and An Inconvenient Truth came out. And for us, that manifested into a couple of different formats. So you can see up behind me there's Power Saver Pete, the chap with the power cord and the big smiley face. Now, he was done in response because we were getting a lot of our staff, because all of this press was out there saying, you know, the world's changing, what are we going to do about it? And our staff were saying, well, yeah, what is CSC going to do about it? So this white noise, as I like to refer to it, was out there. So, well, how are we going to test whether it is just a lot of people saying stuff, or if we give them a vehicle to get engaged with a corporate program, will they actually do it? So what we came up with to test the water was Power Saver Pete. And essentially we used all of our offices and we said, okay, we're going to set you a challenge. Whichever office reduces its power consumption by the largest amount over a 3-month trial wins a free lunch. And this was just our way of saying, if we give you a vehicle, are you going to get on board? And we did. We saved about 11% from the largest office. And in one particular instance, we just opened a new facility in Wollongong. And we'd put a lot of effort into getting some very bright signage up on the roof. That had gone through several rounds of council negotiations, and for some reason Wollongong really dropped in their power consumption. And we thought, well, what's going on there? Why are they so much different, that extra few percentile? And it turned out that despite all of the effort we'd gone to putting it in, they were that keen on winning the competition, they were shutting that down every night. So it really fired up the passions of our staff and was a great engagement vehicle for us. The other reason that started triggering CSC to think, well, what are we going to do in this space? Is this an issue for us? Was the potential, whenever a large organisation does strategic planning, they need to look at risks that are in their current and immediate forecast. They also need to look at 3 years and 5 years down the track. And for us, we were looking at, well, there could well come a time in the future when our data centres start encountering a thermal issue. Now, a thermal issue means that we physically have the space to put more servers in the room, but we're going to struggle cooling them down. We're going to struggle getting the power in there to feed them in the first place. So both of those compelling events thought, well, let's do something about this. So for several months, a lot of our leadership team sat together and they tried to define what green might mean for CSC. They tried to think, well, who's going to own it? Where's it going to sit? And what's it going to look like? And all these great ideas came out. And then they met again next month and talked about the same things again and still nodded heads and said, yeah, that's a really good idea, we need to do something about that. And all of that was done under the auspices of the other chap you can see up on the screen, which is Kermit, Project Kermit, because we realised it ain't easy being green. So after several months of going through this circular conversation, we had a management decision say, right, for us this is a real issue. We need to have someone own this. Whilst it touches on every aspect of our organisation, it doesn't neatly fit into one strongly enough that there's a natural owner. So let's just create one. And that's when we go on to the next slide, which is champion. Before I became the owner of this, as I said, we had lots of meetings. Everyone thought it was a great idea, but they didn't actually own it. And so the first lesson for us with our corporate culture and the way we approached was you need someone to own it. You've got to have someone that can build those networks. I don't have a managerial authority, or I'm not the chief, I'm not an energy czar is a common word that you'll see in the field. But what I do, I'm a change agent or a facilitator. We build the capacity within our teams, and you need that. You need to have someone that can own that initiative. You need to have someone that can try and get hold of the low-hanging fruit so that you get some quick runs on the board and keep management moving along and you keep your staff moving along. It's really crucial that you have an owner, certainly within our organisation. I think probably the only other lesson I learnt from this was that as we started getting better at implanting and putting into our DNA sustainability efforts, we realised that I could engage the staff. I was very good at that. I did really well getting our middle management on board, but when it came to our C-level, I just didn't have the experience and the business skills to really engage them. So for us, I needed to engage the New South Wales Department of Environment, Climate Change and Water, and they came on board and helped us build a methodology around ways of doing that. So we looked at our resource efficiency and we got a lot of sponsorship through the methodology they got. And the other thing we did was I changed my main sponsor. So we got on board a Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, a gentleman called Bob Hayward, that some of you may know. And he's very strong in the sustainability space and has been for several years. And he has a lot of respect and a lot of experience amongst and from the C-level board members, not only in our organisation but across the industry. And so the only other thing is you may well assign a champion for your program, but as your program evolves and grows and changes and adapts, you may find that you need to change your focus or how your messaging goes. So it's not always going to be the same person for all of your requirements. The next part of the lesson that we started learning very quickly was that our culture was quite key. I said earlier that we had Power Saver Pete. That came about because of our staff's passion. We have a very bright workforce, we have a very engaging workforce, and we have a particularly vocal workforce. So we knew that it wasn't worth trying to impose something on them. They needed to be part of the journey and working along with it. But I think it's fair to say, and I appreciate I may well offend a few people on this, but CSC has a very strong engineering focus. We had, and it's changing, but we had a very strong engineering approach to doing things. Now, appreciate this is a sweeping statement, but most engineers, in my experience, tend to come up with an end-of-pipe solution. So what I mean by that is if there's a stormwater drain discharging something out to sea, they will put a mesh or a filter of some sort on the end of that pipe. And that's okay, it works and it's adequate, but it is suboptimal. It's not the holistic, creative sort of approach. So ideally you would go back upstream and say, well, what's occurring at that point? What's driving that? What cultural changes do we need to address? And so we found that within that culture of that engineering focus, Greenway has played a part. It is certainly not the sole reason that we're becoming more like this, but CSC over the last few years has gotten far more collaborative and far more creative and far more engaging across all the different business units in how we are evolving as an entity. And I think it's true that sustainability can do that, certainly did that for us, and I would suggest that for most organisations it's a very useful tool to help drive a very engaging, very collaborative, very innovative workforce. And on that note, we'll flick over to the next slide, which is about creativity. The Greenway program operates on a fairly minimal budget. Every now and then that means that you just can't do something that you really want to. But to be honest, I've experienced to be a bit of a blessing in disguise. So if you have a lot of funding, you tend to just go along the same lines that you always have. We found that we needed to be really creative about the ways that we engaged with our workforce. We had to be very creative about how we got our management on board with things. We had to be particularly creative with the way that we were trying to get the messages out to the marketplace and engage our teams and so forth. So I don't want the CFOs that are listening to this go, oh great, beauty, I can get sustainability sorted and it won't cost me a cent. Your team will need a support. You're going to have to fork out, in our experience, for a champion, for someone to own the efforts. But it's not about just throwing a bucket load of money at it. So some examples that we've had with that was when we launched the program, instead of a huge hurrah, we organised to plant a tree for every CSC staff member. And that wasn't about sequestration of carbon and that sort of thing. It was to try and get across with sustainability that Australia has a large inland salinity problem. We need a lot of wildlife corridors. But the benefit of buying the CSC forest, for want of a better word, was that we now have an ongoing story for the one off an initial cost that we can keep referring back to and back to and back to as the forest keeps growing, rather than giving a show bag or something engaging for the staff that might be exciting that day, but we can never get any more return on that investment. The other sort of things that we've tried to do, we get end-of-year sustainability fairs. So we get a lot of organisations, so whether it's a biodynamic wine producer, whether it's a sustainability store, whether it's someone from Oxfam, to come along to our main offices. And at the end of the year, we suggest to people that you can obviously go to your traditional shopping sites and buy your normal things, but it's well worth looking at the upstream and downstream consequences of that from a sustainability perspective, and look at all these really interesting alternatives that are out there. One of the creativest ways that we had to get involved, I suppose, with the program was the staff were quite easy to get on board. There's lots of fun little things you can do with them. But with our management team, CSC doesn't produce anything. So we don't manufacture things. We are vendor agnostic, but we're not like Hewlett-Packard, we're not like IBM, we're not like Fujitsu, with a large experience in manufacturing and some waste streams that they have had years of experience in trying to monitor. So for us, our industry is relatively benign, certainly in comparison to a lot of other industries out there, like the natural resources sector. So we had to get very creative around how we could get our upper management on board and say, look, this is a serious business issue. We have some risks out there in the marketplace that we need to address, but more importantly, there are some enormous opportunities available in the sustainability space if we're willing to take advantage of those. So the way that we did that was to do role playing. So we suggested to the management at various workshops, well, what if we did have an emissions trading scheme? And what if the price of electricity doubled in the next 2 years? And then ran through some of those scenarios and go, well, what would happen here? What would happen there? What might be a benefit of that? What might be a new opportunity that it generates for us? And through those seed plantings, we started to get on board that slowly, the understanding of what sustainability meant and growing it beyond the green talk that I was getting across before, that's why for us the program has moved from just a staff engagement and internal focus to now more of a marketplace experience for us. I want to talk now about cost. We have had a lot of people when we first start talking about it, well, what does your program cost you? What sort of savings? It's all about the utility savings that we can make. And yes, CSC has saved some good money from this. In our first year of operation in one site alone, we saved over $60,000 in our water bill from changing the types of urinals that we had in the men's toilets. So, and there are lots of other utility bills that we can do work with in our facility space. And that's great, it's very exciting, and in some areas there will be some enormous savings, particularly in the manufacturing sector, that can be realised. But for us, the key thing you've got to think about is what's the cost of not having a program? So if you don't have a sustainability program in place, when you go now for the bids, in our experience over the last 2 or 3 years now, every bid that we have had has contained some sort of request in there for sustainability documentation. And the other area is in the marketplace opportunities. So just last month, so in May 2010, we were awarded an SAP Pinnacle Award as a sustainability partner. So sustainability, incorporating that into an organisation so that they can really understand and leverage the power of knowing their carbon footprint, how their supply chains work, how their logistics teams interact with their distribution teams. There is enormous power in that, and for us that's an enormous opportunity. So I prefer to think of the cost for CSC as the cost of, well, what if we didn't have the program? As we all move towards a carbon adverse economy, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity on the table, and CSC would be leaving that there for someone else to benefit from if we didn't get involved with this. I'm going to leave you now with this last message. For us, I find that it's worked very well on a personal level, on a business unit level, and on a corporate level. And I look forward to having any questions that you've got coming up after this talk. Thanks for your time.